Travis.
I know you've all got a lot of burning questions ready to ask, and we're almost there. Just a little bit more. I'm Travis Parker. I'm the planning director with the City of Lakewood, and happy to be here this morning to talk to you a little bit about how Lakewood is starting to think about integrating and planning for LEED-ND in some of our new development. You heard Cliff talk a little bit earlier about the importance of vicinity to LEED-ND, and that's what I want to start with today. And I want to use some Lakewood examples to talk about that exercise of determining where Lakewood or where LEED-ND might work and might be successful on neighborhood redevelopments in your city. So I want to start actually, talking about the light rail improvements that are going in Lakewood as examples of places where we are considering and, maybe actually accomplishing some LEED-ND projects. So let me start in general with the West Corridor. It's actually, construction is complete on our 7 stations in Lakewood, and the corridor is due to open in about 6 months at the end of April of 2013. All 7 of our stations have had significant public involvement. We've done neighborhood plans for 6 of them. It's been a lot of public and private investment into these areas, and these are all areas that are ripe for redevelopment. And all 7 of our stations actually are unique. They all have different contexts and different opportunities for growth. And I want to just briefly walk through them and start by talking in general. One of the advantages and real pluses of the West Corridor versus some of the other areas of light rail in Denver is the West Corridor is actually one of the only arms of the system that doesn't follow a major highway. And you're probably, as you're all aware, it's difficult to create neighborhoods, to create TOD areas in the shadow of an interstate or a major highway. And so one of the advantages that these locations have is that our line goes through existing neighborhoods. It goes through stable. It goes through areas of change. But it goes through developable parcels and right alongside of neighborhoods and developable parcels. So starting at the east and walking through. I want to describe a little bit about each station area and how LEED-ND either does or doesn't apply to those areas. So Sheridan Station on the east of Lakewood is a station we share with Denver. It's a commuter station. It's going to have about 800 parking spaces, but also a lot of neighborhood connectivity. So we've got a major commercial corridor in Sheridan Boulevard with a lot of opportunity for growth. Surrounding the station on either side, surrounding the corridor on either side, we have established residential neighborhoods. There is a lot of infill potential here, a lot of potential for change. The weakness of this particular area for application of LEED-ND is the lack of large development sites. It would take a lot of accumulation of land to come up with new. So Sheridan is the kind of example of a place where we see a redevelopment in the neighborhood, but more on a piecemeal scale. Lamar, our next station to the west, is a different kind of example. This is actually a walk-up station, a station going through an existing neighborhood, and this has a lot of the qualities that you're going to want to look for a LEED-ND project. It's got a lot of different uses in the area. It's got a lot of existing and potential connectivity in terms of roads, pedestrians, and other types of transportation. And there's a lot of good bones in the area. So you're looking at Lamar Street Station here. Immediately surrounding the station are several dozen acres of underutilized, or sometimes utilized, but sometimes underutilized industrial land. And this is a prime spot with immediate station access for redevelopment. But surrounding that, we have a lot of additional mix of uses. We've got great grid connectivity in the streets that can be continued in development through. We have existing residential. We have strong commercial presence on Colfax and in the JCRS Shopping Center, home of Casa Bonita, as some of you are aware. And the Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design adds an additional element here. So short of the Federal Center, which is the last station I'm going to talk about today, I think this is an area that has the biggest promise for LEED-ND, in that a large developable area, a lot of existing surrounding land uses, a lot of existing connectivity, and a lot of potential for additional future transportation options here in this area. I'm going to quickly go through the next couple. Wadsworth Boulevard Station, another station that crosses an arterial road. You can see in Wadsworth, you've got a commercial strip that's largely underutilized, and a lot of existing commercial uses that are low-scale, auto-oriented. And surrounding this on both sides, just like Sheridan, are existing residential neighborhoods. I think it faces a lot of the same challenges, maybe not to the same extreme as Sheridan, that this is an area that we see a lot of redevelopment coming, but it would require a lot of land acquisition to get a neighborhood-scale project in this area. Picture of the new parking garage. This is going to be a 1,000-square-foot parking garage at Wadsworth. Not the ideal catalyst for new development, but I think it will start to spur the traffic, at least the foot traffic coming to and from, will start to spur some development in Wadsworth. Garrison Station, similar to Lamar, a neighborhood station. This one has a very stable neighborhood to the south and to the west of the station, and a lot of opportunity for additional mixed-use growth to the north and east, especially going towards Colfax. And so, again, an area that would require some acquisition of land, but there is a significant area of change as you go north of the station up towards Colfax. There's certainly the opportunity for application of LEED and D principles in the redevelopment of this area, in transitioning from the stable residential to the higher density commercial. A transition of densities and uses as you're going towards is actually a great place to implement a lot of these LEED and D principles that we've been talking about today. Next, again, continuing to go west, is Oak Street Station. This is a very unique station in our system. It's not necessarily a commuter station, although it is going to have about 200 parking spaces. There's not a lot of existing residential around the station. There is some high-performing industrial use to the south and to the west, but to the north especially, there's a lot of underutilized and large parcels of property. The highlight of this station is the city is talking about investment in a museum, an interpretive center built around a historic car 25. This is one of the original rail cars that went on this line from Denver out to Golden. And Lakewood owns this car and intends to do an interpretive center around it. Immediately north then of that and the station are the 200 parking spaces, and then continue on north to Colfax, which is up here. To the north and to the west, we have 20 to 40 acres of highly developable land, of land that currently is under leases for the next 5 to 7 years. But at the end of that time period, this is an area that will have, again, immediate transit access, will have access to Colfax, and will be large enough and unified enough that I think some good LEED and D development will probably be happening here in the future. I want to focus then today on where we're actually currently working on LEED and D, and that's the Federal Center Station. So the Federal Center Station sits right in the middle. It's an infill site right in the middle of one of Lakewood's biggest employment centers, if not the biggest. Immediately to the east of the station, we have the Federal Center with over 6,000 jobs. To the west, we have Union Boulevard with another 6,000 jobs. And just to the south of the station is the new St. Anthony's Hospital complex. So this is an area with an incredibly robust employment center, but right now, not a lot else going on. There's not a lot of retail or not a lot of residential in the immediate vicinity, and there's certainly a use for a lot more locally serving retail. And that's actually the plan right now. Currently, Lakewood is in discussions with GSA for purchase of the property that is basically within the tracks here, what we call the horseshoe property. 40-plus acres of undeveloped land sitting, virtually on top of the station. We're also in discussions with RTD, which owns a little parcel here and a larger parcel with their existing parking lot on the south station, to do a combined, basically new urban center, about 65 acres, putting all the land together, we hope to find a master developer to work with in a public-private partnership to do a high-density urban center in this area, and not just one of the Belmar type with a lot of big retail, but actually creating a neighborhood here. So we're talking of 6 to 12-story buildings, 5 to 8 million square feet, about half of that being residential. So 2 to 4,000 new residential units is the goal, with some new infrastructure involved here. So as we've been working with GSA and RTD on the vision for this over the last year or so, we had a lot of goals for this project. We wanted to really be innovative in how we handle parking. So eliminating surface parking lots. We want to treat this as a downtown area. But more than that, really eliminating single-use parking and having a commonly managed parking system in structured garages, so public parking garages that are under common management. We wanted to do a significant affordable housing component. We wanted to have a significant biking component with required bike parking, including bike share and car share services in the development. We wanted to be really strict about some urban design standards, getting buildings up to the street, having attached sidewalks with street trees, having the entrances at regular spacing. We want to be very progressive with our energy efficiency here, and we looked at a lot of programs for that, Energy Star, Architecture 2030, a lot of different things. And we're even examining district energy solutions, so the possibility of combining and building on efficiencies of combining energy throughout the entire site. So in going through all of these goals for the site, these lofty goals for the site, we started to think about how are we going to write all these standards? How are we going to set an affordable housing standard for the site? How are we going to set these parking goals? How are we going to do all these things? And in working with Connor and others, we started to see that all of this work had already been done. And we've got the system, you've got Lead and D out, the system out there that has already set all these metrics. And so we've come to the place where we can accomplish everything we want to accomplish without reinventing all these wheels. And right now we're in the process of drafting an RFQ for development of the site that's actually requesting a LEED Platinum development on the site, and would include requirements for a lot of the things that we're talking about. So Connor walked with you through how there are prerequisites in the system, and then to achieve platinum you need to achieve 80 points out of the 110, and it's basically your choice how to achieve that. We're asking for a developer that's willing to do that, but in addition we're also ensuring that we get the things that are important to us, the walkable streets, the urban design, the parking, the affordable housing, by in our RFQ actually requiring that those credits be met. So we don't need to, in our LDA or in our, write a whole section about affordable housing. We're just requiring that they get those LEED and D points for affordable housing and for all the other sections. So that's a way that we're achieving our goals on this site, or will hopefully be achieving our goal on this site using the LEED and D system. And I think that's one of the strengths of the LEED and D system. Both Connor and Cliff talked about it, but you've got tested and nationally vetted standards for all of these things at your fingertips. A city doesn't need to spend their staff resources, your time, your council's energy in determining what the right standards are and setting them. If you want an aggressive standard that is achievable, you can find them here, and you can build on the backbone of the research that's already done in LEED and D. So in talking about advantages of LEED and D for cities, that's the one that I put at the top of the list. The work's done for you. You've got the standards built in. Obviously, there's the environmental standards, the public health, the reduced impacts, the advantages to environmental, and what comes along with that is the cachet, the prestige that development in particular, but also the city in general can have in doing LEED and D development. It can become a statewide or a national example of good development, and this, not only the development but the city itself can benefit from that sort of exposure. And finally, Connor and Cliff touched on this also, but the economic advantages, not only to the development again, but to the city. the studies which of course I haven't cited, but I can go back and update my presentation to cite the studies. The latest study is $11 per square foot premium on rent, over 4% premium on occupancy for LEED certified developments. And these are numbers that are only going to get bigger. Fortune 500 companies, major employers in the country that are looking for new locations are looking to be on transit, and they're looking to be in neighborhoods. They're starting to put a premium on areas where their employees enjoy working and enjoying spending their day, and that's the sort of thing that LEED ND offers and can help you create in your cities. So, a couple caveats. First, LEED ND is not a replacement for comprehensive planning. All of the station areas that I talked about today, Lakewood went through at least a year-long planning for each one of those to determine what we wanted to accomplish in each of those areas. LEED NT is a development tool that can help us accomplish that, but it isn't a substitute for actually doing the planning. And also, LEED NT is a development tool for a particular development, for a neighborhood, for larger scale than LEED for existing buildings or new buildings, but still for a defined area. It's not suitable for an entire city. There is actually a new program called Star Community Index that offers communities the opportunity to rate themselves against other communities, against themselves over time, but LEED ND, it doesn't serve that function and shouldn't be mistaken as something that's applicable citywide. And then, so finally, I want to end with what strategies can your community work on to promote LEED ND? The first is, obviously requiring LEED ND for particular projects, but as Carlos mentioned, there might not be always the political will to do that. One area where that is possible, though, is where public financing is involved. And increasingly these days, projects of the size that you will see for LEED ND don't occur without public financing, whether it's a TIF, a PIF, a metro district, tax incentives. These projects are using public funds, and it is more than reasonable for cities to request LEED ND certification, or at least meeting some of the LEED ND principles in exchange for receiving public financing. Another way is another thing that Cliff talked about is pulling out particular pieces of LEED ND. Again, the work is all done. If you're interested in transportation demand management, if your community is interested in affordable housing, if it's interested in any of these particular issues, even without adopting LEED ND or applying it to a project, you can use the standards that are in LEED ND in your code or on a project or in an area of the city without adopting the whole system. And finally, the simplest thing that a city can do is just get out of the way. If there are developers that want to do LEED ND for themselves, for their own project, there are a lot of codes out there that really put up roadblocks to doing that. And one of the things that cities can do, short of anything else, is just make some updates to their code to get out of the way of LEED ND. And this means things like updating traditional zones that limit to single-use zones. So allowing more areas of the city to accommodate mixed use without requiring a plan development or a long, extensive public hearing. Updating your setback requirements to allow buildings to come up to the street, not necessarily requiring 60-foot minimum front setback, not necessarily requiring a separation between buildings where they want to be attached. Addressing parking minimums is a huge one. We no longer live in a world where we need zoning to tell us how much parking to build. The market does that for us these days. So eliminating parking minimums is the ideal. At the very least, lowering them to a level where developers can be thoughtful about how much parking they put in, especially when there are other options available, is incredibly important here. And another example, among many others, and I won't go any further, is updating landscaping requirements, especially in this area, to allow for drought-resistant, low-water landscaping, that sort of thing. So with that, I'll end, and I know all four of us are available at least for another 2 minutes for questions, and 3 of us for the rest of the time. Thank you.